Now, if we're talking about supposing what you mentioned earlier, job cuts because of the US government, or if you're talking about things like our shop closures that we've experienced lately, you may find that the person who's looking to start a business does not necessarily have the capital to
Yes.
actually get into, say, transport sector as a transporter. They may not have a vehicle. If they do, that's great. I think most people have some kind of car.
Yes.
So if you have a vehicle, you could start there. But if you don't have a vehicle, then you can start thinking around how you can use what you know and the people you know to be part of this. Someone mentioned that, because of job cuts, I may have been sending my child to
A
a
school.
government school, but a type school. And now I have to move with my family, maybe to the rural areas. I shouldn't force Kugaram town because my child needs to go to an A school when I can no longer afford it. I should be able to make that emotional decision to move to where my money allows me to live um, a respectable life.
Adjusting.
Yes. Now I have an example of a young boy I know. Um, he's in the haulage sector
Okay.
and he doesn't have a truck yet. So what he does is he knows people with loads and he knows people with trucks, and
Brings the two
he
together.
just brings the two together, and that's his contribution to the transport sector. And I would like to think that possibly after a while of doing this and taking the money, you can also then eventually get your own truck. You can think of an entry point into anything that you want to do, which does not require you to have capital outside of what you already have.
Yes.
Sometimes it's about looking around you right now. Like, I have a car. A lot of people have gone into InDrive these days. I
Lovely to
have a
have you along with us today on Sly Media TV on this wonderful journey that we've been having with Yanaya. Yanaya is an organization that is mainly led by youth and women, and they work with groups often marginalized by mainstream society, including the homeless, people in rural communities, people in the informal sector, women, youth of diverse gender, and children in marginalized and underdeveloped communities, sex workers, people with disabilities, and women and youth in business. And as we all know, throughout the series of episodes that we have been bringing to you, it has always been centered around the recent announcement that was made by the United States government under the leadership of President Donald Trump, where there was an immediate stop to funding and implementation of programs funded through the United States government. We've had one-on-one conversations, heart-to-heart conversations, whereby we were learning from people that were affected by the cutting of funds. And today, in all of that, I am joined by Pearl, who is also part of the Yanaya organization, and she's here to take us through how we can adapt, how we can innovate and survive through this tough time. Pearl, welcome to the program. I'm very glad to have you with us today.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for having me.
I am
Nice to
great.
be here.
So let's start off with the work that you do with Yanaya and also some of the projects that you're handling by yourself.
All right. So, what I do is in my work as a consultant, I'm an entrepreneurship consultant, and I work in collaboration with the guys from Yanaya. My main task when I'm there is to help with the women in terms of how they can improve their livelihoods by especially going into entrepreneurship. I'm a trainer. I help them to understand how they can improve their situations in terms of finances, in terms of how they run their businesses, and even in terms of things like domestic violence and stuff.
Okay.
So that's what I do with Yanaya. I also run an online space called Fempreneurs Africa. And in that space, women find tools to help them build their businesses. They find stories of success by other women because we found that's how women learn best. And you also find tips to how you can get funding and things like that. So that's in a nutshell, is what I do.
Okay, so today is definitely going to be exciting because you're looking at the recent situation and the recent developments with the cutting of funds. About 3,000 people lost their jobs. So it means that men, women, children were affected. So we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. Let's start off with the question, what is business?
Well, basically, business is whereby an individual undertakes to do some activity in return for a profit, for people who actually want that product or service. In a nutshell, yes, that's what business is.
Okay, so let's talk about who can start a business. I believe, in terms of the work that you do, you mainly focus with the women in rural areas or underdeveloped communities. Take us through maybe what can they do? What is the situation like?
Okay. When you say who can start a business, I'm hesitant to say everyone
Okay,
because well, running a business is something that is very driven by your insides. You have to really want to run this business, and you have to be the kind of person who can motivate and drive yourself to do this. Because if you are going to be the business owner, nobody's going to call you and say, have you arrived at work? Have you served your customers well? Have you produced a good product? So it needs somebody who's willing to be a lot of things at the same time to be able to run a business. So, in other words, I'll give an example of a boy who used to run a tuck shop in the rurals in Murewa. When he was working for someone, his customer care was top notch, and the business was always flooding with customers. But when he started running his own business, he got, I guess, big headed, and his customer
okay.
care dropped, and now his shop is empty. So I wouldn't say running a business is for everyone. I'd say in this case, this guy was probably a better employee than he was a businessman. However, we're here because we are saying employment spaces are shrinking,
Yes.
and people have to start finding ways to survive outside of being who you have always been, who you've gotten used to being over the years. So there are certain things that people can learn and start inculcating in themselves to become good entrepreneurs. The good news is it's doable. So,
Okay.
yes, you may not be the ideal entrepreneur at the start of your journey, but if you're committed to learning, you can be a very good entrepreneur. Anyone who's willing to learn can become a good entrepreneur.
I believe the situation has brought us to this particular position where we would want to learn about business. Take us through the basics of maybe starting a business.
Okay. Starting a business, when we're engaging with somebody who's fresh from probably employment or from school or who has never ever run a business, we normally like to have them take a questionnaire which
Okay.
helps them to understand their entrepreneurial abilities a little bit better. It will highlight to them about their own personality, strengths and areas to improve on. Are you good with finances? Are you good with taking risks? Do you have the right support structure? Do you know about money? Are you willing to give this your all? Because oftentimes in entrepreneurship, you have to give it your all.
Okay, you have to be
Yeah.
available.
So we start out with the like a self introspection thing. So you have to do that with yourself. Understand what your strengths are and what your areas to work on are. Once you've done that, then you're ready to actually start looking at different business ideas. So it's so tempting to say, Sandra's running a tuck shop, so I'm going to run a tuck shop. Because then that's kind of like the path of least resistance, which we all like to take. But you have to think outside the box. You have to think about other services that are not being provided. Or if you really, really want to run a tuck shop like Sandra, then you have to think of a way of doing it differently so that people choose you over Sandra.
Okay.
Yes. So that's the second stage is your idea. Think through different ideas. Don't, when you're still thinking of an idea, put everything on the table. Go crazy. And then start narrowing down your options. When you're narrowing down your options, you're now looking at things like, what are my skills? Because you want to run a business that you have a skill in, or a business that you have experience in, or a business that aligns with your passions. And obviously, most importantly, a business that has a market,
Yes.
a viable market.
Okay.
So if I have a business and the only person who can buy from me is Ray, then I don't have a business.
Yes.
But if I have a business and I can think of 100 people in my community immediately, then I have a good business idea. So that's how you then cut down your list of crazy ideas, which has 1,000 ideas, to maybe 3 or 4. And then you start actually going in depth. Now you're going into like things like the SWOT analysis. I'm sure you've heard of those ones.
Yes.
Where you're now saying, what opportunities are there in this business? How can I make this business better? How can I get a better market? So, for example, I may only have 2 customers in Zimri, but I can get 100 in the UK. How can I get those 100? And so on and so forth. So now you're going into the actual planning of the business with your small short list of 2 or 3 business ideas. And once you've gone through that process, you will now be able to identify the best business for you, because the best business for you isn't the best business for me. Okay. So it's important for people to realize that before they start, that they can do anything as long as they are going to plan the business properly and they know where to find their markets. So the marketing strategy, I would say, is the biggest portion of your business plan. A lot of people think it's the money.
Yes.
So you'd think, I need $10,000. If I have $10,000, then I can make 20. No, what you need is a good marketing plan. You need to know where your customers are, who they are, what they want, how you can actually give them what they want, and at the same time make a profit for yourself. Because obviously we're all going into business. We're not going into it to to make losses.
Yes.
So that's the business planning process. Once you've done that, now you're ready to actually take the first step towards building your business.
Okay, that is quite impressive. But looking at the fact that there's been a lot of talk in terms of entrepreneurship and starting a business, it might seem a little bit far-fetched, but we're looking at a situation whereby you might be in the rural areas. Like you highlighted before, that it can be anything as long as it is bringing a bit of change, some of that profit. So take us through some of the business ideas that people can implement at a time such as this.
Okay, great. So here in Zimbabwe, I would say our biggest opportunity that's available to almost everyone is in the agro sector,
Okay.
right? Sustainable agriculture is a buzzword everywhere. With very limited resources or capital, you can actually start a very good agro business. So there's opportunities in the actual production, to be an actual farmer where you are actually tilling the
The land.
ground, yes, to processing, where you're getting from another farmer and you're adding value and taking that to the market. There's opportunities in actually just being a what do they call that person? Aggregator.
Okay.
You can actually just be the person who brings the market together and takes it to, like, you can take the produce, take it to the market.
All right.
There's also opportunities in the transport sector, in the transporting of all this agro produce. So for me, I personally am very much in love with the agro sector, because that's, I think, the only business where you can't fail to find a market. It's going to be eaten.
Okay, somewhere,
Yes,
somehow. We
it's
need
going
food.
to be eaten. Yes, so it's almost impossible to farm and not earn something.
Okay, I like the fact that you highlighted the process in all of the food coming from the farm, ending at the table. There are a lot of sectors and segments there. Take us through maybe what a person can do. Maybe you want to be part of the transport sector. You might not just only be the driver, maybe of the combi, but you can be fixing the cars. You are part of the system. So take us through maybe the opportunities in terms of just self-introspection. What can I do in different stages of the process in terms of just maybe acquiring and starting up a business?
Right. Excellent. That's a good question. So, what we spoke about is the different parts of the value chain, right?
Yes.
And you identified correctly that there's so many ways of getting into it. Now, if we're talking about supposing what you mentioned earlier, job cuts because of the US government, or if you're talking about things like our shop closures that we've experienced lately, you may find that the person who's looking to start a business does not necessarily have the capital to
Yes.
actually get into, say, transport sector as a transporter. They may not have a vehicle. If they do, that's great. I think most people have some kind of car.
Yes.
So if you have a vehicle, you could start there. But if you don't have a vehicle, then you can start thinking around how you can use what you know and the people you know to be part of this. Now, I have an example of a young boy I know. Um, he's in the haulage sector
Okay.
and he doesn't have a truck yet. So what he does is he knows people with loads and he knows people with trucks and
Brings the two
he
together.
just brings the two together, and that's his contribution to the transport sector. And I would like to think that possibly after a while of doing this and taking the money, you can also then eventually get your own truck. So capital is never a hindrance to you starting a business. It's just how you think about it and how you plan to enter that sector that makes a difference. So yeah, I think that's important for anybody who's possibly in a hard place right now and wondering how they're going to get out of it, to realize that it's all in your mind. And this is not motivational speaking.
Okay. Okay. But
It's
we need
literally
that.
all in your mind. You can think of an entry point into anything that you want to do, which does not require you to have capital outside of what you already have.
Yes.
Sometimes it's about looking around you right now. Like, I have a car. A lot of people have gone into InDrive these days. I
Yes.
have an oven. I can
Bake
bake,
cakes.
hopefully make good cakes. I have a TV screen. I can show people lessons on it. You know, just whatever you have, think around it. Some ideas may be absurd, but some ideas can actually be pretty good.
And playing the middleman, I feel like in Zimbabwe it has taken a big role in terms of maybe the clothing industry, whereby just people, you need your clothes, I can deliver them to you. You can just be the delivery person. So there's
Yes.
so many opportunities around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so also continuing on that, there comes the idea of we're at a space whereby things are not that easy. But business and entrepreneurship, like you highlighted, it might not be motivational speak, but it's all about the mind. Take us through maybe that sort of step that you can take to maybe say you want to bring yourself to say, you know what, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, and that right mindset to properly run a business and to be consistent with it. It might be selling airtime by the street corner, you might be selling, tomatoes, pamsika. What goes through the mind? Because some person might just say, you know what, this might be too little for me, but the children need to eat. So take us through the mindset. How do you get there?
All right. What you're talking about is an important thing. Um, so oftentimes you come across somebody who's running a business. You call it a business, but they don't know how to to scale it up such that it can feed the children.
Yes.
Like you rightly said, if I'm selling airtime and I'm making 8 cents per card, how long can I keep that up? And how am I going to feed my 5 children? So what needs to happen is that people running these small micro businesses and who want to grow. I used to work for the SME Association of Zimbabwe, and one thing we realized is that it's not every small business that actually wants to grow.
Okay.
Some people are perfectly happy where they are. But if they want to grow, they need to start joining platforms that encourage growth. So it's good to even be in small circles like your what do they call them, savings and credit cooperatives, or lending lending groups that you do in your community. That's a starting point. But you also then need to take it further if you want to grow further. Get even a mentor, somebody who understands your ambition, somebody who knows that you're in this and you're there to stay. Because there's a difference between somebody who's selling airtime because they're waiting for the next job interview and someone who's selling airtime because they think, you know what, in the next 5 years, I want to have grown this business from just airtime vending to, I don't know, digital, some kind of big digital platform. So if you actually want to start and grow your business, you're going to need somebody who's going to mentor you through the process. Somebody who's going to say, okay, fine, you are here right now. You are making $5 a day. The next step is for you to move from $5 to $100. How are you going to do that? What kind of funding do you need to move across? What kind of marketing strategy do you need to move across? What kind of person do you need to be to
Okay.
move from that $5 to the $100? So sometimes without that kind of guidance, you will spend a lot of time blundering in the dark, hitting walls, and that's not necessary. So find platforms, find mentors to adjust your the way you think and the way you operate so that you grow.
Okay.
Yes.
That's why we're grateful for people like you who continuously teach us on these things. But
Yes.
just looking at what we've been discussing, I believe it is financial literacy, of which that is the buzzword, maybe even on the internet. But people are not really, just accustomed to all of this. Like you said, it might just be a mentor, someone who's been doing it for years, who can give you this sort of education. But in terms of just accessing this financial literacy, where do people need to go? Who do they need to ask in terms of just getting this financial literacy?
So the good news I've noticed in Zimbabwe is that it has become mandatory for all financial institutions to offer financial literacy training.
Impressive.
So any financial institute that you know should be able to provide you with that. They are mandated by the Reserve Bank to offer free financial literacy training.
Okay.
Yes. So if it's your bank or your microfinance lender, even those guys, Wichimbadzo, the licensed guys, they have to.
Okay.
All these institutions that we're talking about just now, the groupings of entrepreneurs, they offer those kinds of training. They will teach you how to manage your money such that even if you're earning $5, you don't find yourself in a space where you are so hard pressed that you don't even know how to maneuver. They talk about the things that seem obvious but are very difficult to implement. But when you're doing it as a group, it becomes easier. Someone mentioned that, because of job cuts, I may have been sending my child to
A
a
school.
government school, but a type school. And now I have to move with my family, maybe to the rural areas. I shouldn't force Kugaram town because my child needs to go to an A school when I can no longer afford it. I should be able to make that emotional decision to move to where my money allows me to live a respectable life.
Adjusting.
Yes. It's crazy how one time we were talking about how urban poverty is often worse than rural poverty.
Okay.
So I have experienced both sides. You can be in town and literally go to bed hungry with your whole family. But do you know what? That doesn't happen in the rural areas.
Quite true.
A lot of people spend time going to the rural areas looking for people who are suffering. People who are suffering in town. And they're in town for emotional reasons. They're not financially intelligent reasons. If your money is rukukwana, it's best for you to take your family. And people are living properly dignified lives in the rural areas. Sorry, it's slightly off topic, but imagine living in town in one room and you're a family of six.
Yes.
But in the rural areas, you can all have your separate rooms. People can have space and you can actually be normal, you know? Um, I don't think anyone can picture what it's like to live in one room as an entire family.
It's quite hard.
It's very difficult and it makes a lot of functions very difficult. Like your child wants to wake up at night and study. They can't do that because then there's a baby who's going to wake up and start crying and everyone's going to be upset. But if you're in the rural areas and everybody's got in their own spaces, you put up your solar, everyone is good. So emotional adjustments are necessary for us to be able to survive these times where there's less money on the market, there's less jobs that we can get, and there's a lot of pressure. Let's not discount social media. There's a lot of pressure to do things that you can't afford. So you need to be in circles that encourage you to see the facts for themselves and to be able to act effectively on those facts. I'm not saying everyone must go to the rules,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying adjust.
Okay.
We have to become strong enough to adjust.
Yeah, you sort of tipped into the question that I wanted to ask you next about managing your finances. And you're talking about that sort of adjusting. Many people, especially for women, we have standards and we
Yes.
would like to keep the
We
standards.
want to
So
set standards.
we tend to live a life that is somewhat, people would see us as though we are living that expensive life, but back at home, we know what's really going on. So this mandate of sort of like adjusting, knowing what you can afford and what you can manage at the time, because it's not forever. And that's what people need to know. Like, just the knowledge. Take us through maybe that idea, because you, like you highlighted, you experienced both worlds. Someone might be saying, you know what, I want to live in the city, but it's not viable at the moment. So take us through maybe just understanding that this is a phase. We'll get back to where we were before.
Exactly. All right, excellent. So I saw a meme last week that said, it's not time that heals,
Okay.
but it's what you do with the time. So I may be living for 3 months, but whether I'm going to be in a phase or whether this is going to become my permanent life depends on what I do in those 3 months, right? So you have a situation where, okay, we're both broke. Maybe by hook or crook, we can both raise $100 a month. If you save $50 a month for 3 months, you're going to have $150 at the end of 3 months that you can use to start something. But if I borrow $50 every month, I'm going to have debt of $50, of $150 by the end of it. We're just talking about 3 months. So you can see how is my financially difficult situation going to be permanent or is it going to be a phase? It's determined by what I do. So it's never too late to change how you're managing your finances. If you were used to living a life where you spend more than you earn, now is the time to stop.
Yes.
Yes. Now is the time to stop. Now is the time to start saving. And don't underestimate the power of saving marishoma. Even if you can only manage $20 a month, get in the habit of saying, I have $100. No, I don't have $100. I have $80 because I've already set aside my $20. I'm not going to touch it. And then I'm going to live off the 80 as if that's all I ever had. So when we start changing our money personalities like that, things will start changing for us. It then becomes a phase. It then stops being things will get better. Let's have a mantra every morning to say, I am grateful for the money I have, when you haven't changed anything in the way that you're doing things.
Okay.
So if you do that, if you start learning how to budget, if you start learning how to save, if you start learning how to get rid of interest bearing debt, if you start learning how to plan for your retirement, because, one day I was you and now I'm me, and next day I'm going to be retired. And I'm not going to be able to earn any money. If I haven't planned for that, it's going to be a very destitute time for me when I'm retired. So things like that, things like learning how to plan for your retirement, learning how to invest wisely, learning to save, learning to budget. Those are the things that if you use your time to learn and implement, will move you from being poor for a phase will move you from being poor forever to being poor for just a phase. And
Yes.
then you get over it and you're able to do what you need to do with your life.
Yeah, indeed. And you're highlighting some good points there to do with saving, budgeting, and this major monster, maybe that many people haven't been able to understand for quite a long time, debt. many people have lived lives like, you look at the particular situation, the United States government, they have cut off funding. Many people used to work for NGOs and they earned a lot of money, but now you have to change your lifestyle and just trying to adjust to that. Maybe there would be a time whereby they would be spending more than they could have been earning. So take us through maybe how you can manage your debt, come out of it, and sort of live a free life.
Okay. So in Zimbabwe, unfortunately, we don't have, I noticed in places like South Africa, they have organizations that actually take your debt. I think it's important for them because they have a lot of access to debt. We have very little access here. So they'll consolidate your debt and then they will take it over and talk to your creditors for you. But in exchange for that, they will now control your money. So you earn
Okay.
$100 and they'll tell you this month you're going to live on $5. 95 we're going to use on our plans with the creditors. Oftentimes, creditors are comfortable with these arrangements because they can trust this organization that has come through because you have failed in the past, but they know that these guys, that's what they do. And when they say they're going to pay you $5 a month for the next 100 months, they are going to pay you $5 a month for the next 100 months. So since we don't have those facilities here, the best you can do now is, like I was saying, when you look at your income, take a certain portion and dedicate it to clearing debt every single month. Every single month. So if you've already lost your job, yes, that can seem like a pipe dream. But whatever means you are using to survive with your family, this is why we're saying cutting back becomes very important. Because if you don't cut back, you're continuing to grow that debt. And what you want to do is to stop and start deflating it. So whatever money you get, just dedicate some to your debt payments. Ask yourself every single expense, is this absolutely necessary? Be the Donald Trump. This is what he did for
Okay.
his country.
Yeah.
He sat down, he said, is this necessary? And he said, no, this is not necessary. And he cut it. So for you, if it's margarine that's not going to be had and people are going to have dry bread, we're going to take that $3 for margarine and use it to pay our debts. So strip down to the bare essentials, try to pay off your debts, and start saving. That's how you can start to live a financially free life.
Okay, so the major topic that we're talking about is to do with business. You've experienced both worlds and you've seen how things sort of run from either end, either on the other side of Samora or not. But take us through maybe in rural areas, what are some of the things that they can know? Because you're looking at a community whereby many of them, maybe they might work at a plot and almost everything sort of provided for them. And just you starting your own business and being independent or different from other people might be hard. What can they do to maybe sort of access the market, learn a thing or two to just make sure that they stand out?
So my experience with the rural community has been that there are very few businesses that actually thrive there or actually grow. Um, okay, the ones that I have identified is your workman skills. So people like plumbers, electricians, mechanics in rural communities, those people can start businesses
Okay.
because rural communities will always have mechanization. There's someone with a tractor, there's someone with a plow. Oh yeah, welders, you know. There's someone who's running a small transport business. All those people always need those kind of services. The other business I've noticed that thrives in rural communities is the transport, like Mushika Shika. Those are also doing well. I've seen people grow from one car to two to three. So those sectors will do well. Also in the rurals, I've seen women in farming, in horticulture mainly. So women will go into horticulture and crops. So women are growing chibage, they're growing bambaira, onions, and they're taking them to Mbare Msika. So they have those businesses going, but very few of them will then go to the next stage to actually stop being more of subsistence, because you find that someone who does, oh yeah, broiler rearing is also another one.
Yes,
Someone who does those things is just doing it to send their children to school and
that's it.
survive. Yeah. But I know of one lady who has taken it a step further. She has actually gone and I think she started out supplying Mbari, and then now she's gotten herself a stall at Mbari. And
Okay.
her business has really grown because now she can afford to buy herself several cars. She works in a business that turns over tens of thousands a month. So it's because of the mindset that she put in herself, whereby she felt, look, I'm growing onions, I'm taking them to Mbari, but what are these people doing? And then she took it a step further. But it's not everybody with that kind of mindset. So it goes back to what we were saying about, do you want your business to grow or not?
Okay.
If you want your business to grow, then start associating yourself with the right circles, like-minded people who are actually taking things outside our comfort zone of our rural area. And you have to also have the ability to take risks. So, for example, you find that most women, which is the people I deal with mostly, are hesitant to leave their home because if their husband says no, then, that's it. So this is what we were talking about when I said we start with that questionnaire. Do you have the right support for you
Okay.
to start your business? Because if you're trying to start a business and your husband is against it or your in-laws are against it, then you know that you have that much more to work on. It's either you're going to have to persuade your community to see things your way, or you're going to have to leave that community. It depends how badly you want to
Yeah.
do this. So those are some of the things that are happening in the rurals. Those are some of the opportunities that are there, and those are some of the hindrances that you find there. Access to capital is relatively good in the rurals
Okay.
because they have those internal savings and lending groups. So they know each other, they know how much each person makes. They've gotten very good at organizing themselves financially like that. So they're able to give each other money as and when the other person needs it. And they still have a strong social fabric that ensures that people live up to their obligations. So they do have access to funding. It's the it's the desire to grow that maybe needs to be cultivated some
Dated.
more.
Yeah, just talking about that desire to grow, like you are highlighting that there are groups that they have already formed. Some of them are using their own skills to sustain their families, which means that, do you also believe that the education system in the country has to sort of adjust to the new normal that has been made available because of the recent changes in the way that people are earning?
I think it would be nice if the new curriculum could help children to be better adjusted to our new normal. Um, my personal opinion is that we 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 don't have a normal for very long.
Okay.
Our our environment is changing so fast, and
Mm.
it's not because of it's not changing the way the world is changing. It's just our own internal workings as a country that change so often that it's very difficult for somebody to go through 13 years of education and come out adjusted for the normal that they're going to meet at the end of the 13 years. You understand?
Okay. Okay.
You may come out adjusted to the normal that was there when you were at ECDA, which doesn't quite work.
Work.
Yeah. But it would be nice if such could be done. I think maybe this is where organizations like the NGOs used to come in with entrepreneurship training, because they would then take this person who's done their 13 years or 17 years after varsity, and they would then say, look, you are struggling to get a job. These are the skills you have. These are the opportunities. What do you want to do? And they would help them to adjust, and from I'm going to get a job as a project manager to, okay, I'm going to start a business in knitting socks. Yeah. So yeah, there's an opportunity, I guess, for those who are able to help children to transition from whatever normal they come out with at the end of school to being ready for providing employment for other people.
Okay, so before we close, I just want to hear from you. What are some of the changes that you've noticed after the United States government cut funds that were funding some of these organizations? What have you noticed as some of the biggest changes that have been brought about?
Um, I think that we had a lot of reliance on donor funding.
Okay.
We needed them to help us with our TB programs. We needed them to help us with our HIV programs. We needed them to help us with our sexual reproductive health programs. We needed them to help us with so many things. And now that that funding is gone, because those things affect a lot of people, there's a bit of despondency. People aren't sure who's going to catch that ball, if it's going to be caught at all, if people are just going to be allowed to die. So I think there's an opportunity for us as a country to sit down and really come up with proper, tangible solutions for those funding gaps. Not solutions where we're just, doing deals with each other,
Yeah.
but actual proper, let's help the people kind of solutions. I think we have the capacity. I hope we're going to put that capacity to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof, for joining me today and for
Okay.
the information that you have so graciously given to us. And I believe you, our viewers at home, managed to glean a thing or two, and it helps you in starting a business. And what I love about the episodes that we've had is the same fact that Zimbabwe, we need to adjust and we need permanent solutions. My name is Sandra Maganya, and I say goodbye for now.